It doesn't feel right.
We did deliver to Metro 2 days ago a Freedom of Information Act request seeking certain information so that we can learn facts, and the response that we get, if we get one from them, may be helpful to us in assessing what we do next. So we're not just sitting still. We are constantly working. I think there is a general feeling among the lawyers at ACLU that we may be able to distinguish the situation here in Washington, D.C. from New York and Boston. And if so, then break some ground on this whole process of subway and bus bag searches. So we're not sitting idle, we're doing things. It's complicated, as Professor Ferguson said, it takes a little time, but we're on the case.
It's also the reality that if you study the New York case, a lot of the reason why the judge and courts went the way they did was because there had been a factual record developed with experts and people who are willing to come forward and say that this actually works. And so you have to build, before you can go forward, you really do have to build that factual record, that expert record, to be able to demonstrate that this is not an effective use, this is not being an effective policy. All of those things are part of the legal strategy. We have, we're actually technically out of time, but we have people who have been patiently raising their hand back there. So, sir?
A couple of questions about the way that this case might be different from New York and might be different in general from other surveillance cases or bag search initiatives. One is about the Chief Taborn's statement that people who refuse to search would be observed, watched. FBI might be brought in, DHS might be brought in to figure out why. That seemed like a new thing that contradicted what was a stipulation in the McQuaid v. Kelly case, the New York case, where they said part of why they went ahead with approving that was that you had the freedom to refuse. This would seem to undermine that freedom to refuse. Second, in general, both with that case and with this case, it seems like just reading that one decision, which is all the amount of time I had to put into researching, something I noticed was that early on in the case history of this, the judges were saying, okay, you can stop people at airports because they have an alternative. They can get on a ship or take a bus or drive a car or do something else. It seems to me like we're increasingly widening the scope of surveillance and of interdiction, and that argument is starting to no longer apply. That we're putting up more and more Trinidad's bag search places. How do you think those two things would might factor in a legal argument? Is that, or am I wrong to think that would matter?
I mean, I think they're certainly relevant to a legal argument. I'm just going more based on pragmatic instincts than anything else, which is you make very sound, rational arguments. I'm not sure the sound, rational arguments are going to carry the day. I tend to think, in response to your question, that issues like this sometimes have no other way to resolve other than by political action. If you don't motivate people to political action, you lose. And so it is much more of a grassroots effort. And the last quick thing I'd say is I do think sometimes you have to look for fallback positions. So if you can't get rid of the whole thing, is there a way to make it more difficult to implement and maybe a little bit less abusive? One of the things I think about is accountability. There's been research showing if you make any person, but including the police, explain in real detail what they did and why, and then have to justify it to a supervising authority, they're less likely to make mistakes. So you know, fine, you're going to do this. Why shouldn't every search be videotaped, every stop be videotaped, and then you have to write a written justification for why you did it, and then it has to go to the courts or a panel of the courts or to be looked at. It should be publicized. I think that if there's review, if there's publicizing, you're more likely to get public pressure, political pressure, and it's of less value to them.
And I would second everything that Andrew just said, and agree with you that those are definitely pertinent things. And one of the things that's been frustrating to me, not just in this discussion, but in all security measures that have been taken post 9/11, is that there is no analysis of whether these things actually help. And if the concern was swine flu, and they said, what we're going to do is random bag searches, everybody would go, what? You know, how does that make sense? Well, I'm not aware of any studies that show that random bag searches are any more effective at preventing terrorism than they are at preventing swine flu. And if you look at these programs, the perfect one that Jim has written quite a bit about is that is similar to this is the TSA's, what they call their SPOT program, where they train TSA agents to be behavior detection officers, where they look for, you know, whether you blink too many times or whether you're nervous or sweating at an airport. You know, how about everybody? And this has been in practice for a couple of years now, and finally GAO did a report, an investigation of it in a report, and they have sent hundreds of thousands of people to secondary screening because they blinked too much, and they have discovered, I can't remember the number exactly, the number of terrorists they discovered. Jim?
0.
0. Now, GAO did something brilliant in their study. They looked at real terrorists. They found people who were convicted of terrorism during that time period in the United States and counted how many times they had traveled through airports where this program existed. So again, and found, I think it was 8 real terrorists, convicted terrorists, traveled through 16 spot airports 23 times without detection. So, you know, is this program you know, we're throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars at this program, millions of dollars at this program.
The Christmas Day bomb.
Right, exactly. That is completely useless. And if you put, again, you know, we're going to paint a red dot, you know, on the top of every third passenger's head as our security program. You know, it makes no more sense than this program, and that has to start weighing into some of this reasonableness analysis, the fact that there's no evidence that this is actually an effective method.
And we asked the police in the hearing, do you have any reason to believe that this will work here, did work in New York? They said no. They have no evidence that it would specifically work.
Yet that experts testified to Professor Alpert and then someone.
Reginald Lewis wrote a book which was called Why White Boys Have All the Fun.